It had been a long time since I last felt true fear. I had always prided myself on my courage, dismissing ghost stories as mere superstition. But that night, as I stood in front of the decrepit hospital, something in my gut told me this was no ordinary place. It was a place that had seen horrors, where the walls themselves seemed to whisper the forgotten screams of its past inhabitants. The hospital had been abandoned for years, ever since a string of unexplained deaths had occurred. People said it was cursed. There were rumors of patients being used for illegal experiments, things that no one had ever dared to confirm, but many chose to believe. That's why I and a small group of like-minded thrill-seekers decided to venture inside. We'd heard stories, of course. Everyone in town had their own version of the horrors that took place behind the hospital's rusted gates. But none of those stories prepared us for what we would experience that night. As I stepped through the hospital's rusted gates, I felt an uneasy chill run down my spine. The air smelled stale, filled with decay and neglect, and the place was eerily silent except for the wind that howled like a lost soul across the desolate grounds. My flashlight cut through the darkness, but it felt as though the light was swallowed by the shadows the moment it left the beam. My friends and I exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared to turn back. The first floor of the hospital was surprisingly intact, though it was clear the place had not been in use for decades. The walls were lined with faded, yellowed wallpaper, peeling and cracked in places. Some of the rooms still had their original equipment: old wheelchairs, rusted metal beds, and crumbling medical tools. But it was the quiet that struck me most. The silence felt unnatural, like the building itself was holding its breath. We moved cautiously, exploring room after room, our laughter and jokes echoing through the empty halls. But the deeper we went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The faint scent of antiseptic, once familiar, now smelled like death. The floorboards creaked underfoot, each step seeming to amplify the feeling of being watched, though there was no one else in sight. Then, as I rounded a corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. At the end of the hallway stood a door, half open, leading into a room that appeared normal at first glance. But the faint light from my flashlight revealed something that didn't belong. An old photograph, yellowed with age, tacked to the wall. It showed a group of hospital staff, their faces obscured by shadows, but one face stood out. A man, his eyes glowing unnaturally, staring straight into the camera as though he knew I would be there. The sight of that face made me feel as though I had been caught in a web of fate, unable to escape. As I stepped closer to inspect the photograph, I felt the temperature drop dramatically. A chill that seemed to seep into my bones, creeping up my spine and settling in the pit of my stomach. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed shut behind me. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest, but there was no one there. My friends, those who had been right behind me only moments ago, were gone. I stood frozen, my mind racing as I realized the hospital had swallowed them whole. Panic began to set in. I reached for my phone, but the screen remained blank. No signal. No way to reach out. I was completely alone in this forsaken place, and I had no idea what had happened to my friends. Were they trapped? Were they taken? The silence in the air had become suffocating, pressing against me with an unnatural force. I stumbled back into the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the void. I tried calling out for my friends, but my voice was swallowed by the building, absorbed into the very walls, as if the place itself was trying to erase all traces of life. I found myself in front of another door, this one slightly ajar. I hesitated for a moment before pushing it open, my flashlight trembling in my hand. Inside, the room was vast, too large for the floor plan of the hospital, and filled with strange, unsettling equipment. Surgical tables, restraints, and medical charts, all covered in a thick layer of dust. The walls were lined with cabinets, but what caught my eye was the large mirror across from me. It was cracked, the glass fractured in several places, but it reflected something that shouldn't have been there. A figure standing just behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. But there was no one there. The mirror was empty, the room deserted. I turned back, my pulse racing, and glanced once more at the cracked glass. That's when I saw it. A figure, a shadow standing behind me in the reflection. It was a woman, her features blurred, as though she had been erased and reconstructed by the glass itself. Her eyes were hollow, black voids that seemed to stare into my very soul. My mind screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't move. The woman's lips curled into a twisted smile, and in a voice that seemed to reverberate inside my skull, she whispered, You shouldn't be here. I staggered backward, slamming into the wall as the room around me seemed to shift and warp. The walls were closing in, the floor beneath me buckling as though the building itself was alive, breathing, shifting. My flashlight flickered wildly, casting grotesque shadows that danced and twisted like living creatures. Suddenly, I was no longer alone. From the far end of the room, a low, guttural noise began to grow louder, a scraping sound like nails dragging across metal. I turned toward the noise, my stomach lurching in fear. A figure was crawling toward me, its body contorted at impossible angles, moving with an unnatural speed. It wasn't human. It was something else, something that had been twisted and broken by whatever horrors had once been carried out in this hospital. Its mouth was open wide, filled with jagged teeth, and it screeched in a high-pitched, unholy sound. I ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, my legs pumping with adrenaline as I sprinted through the hallways. The sound of the thing chasing me grew louder, closer, but I didn't dare look back. I pushed open door after door, my breath ragged, my heart racing as I searched for an escape. Finally, I found it, an emergency exit at the end of the hall. My hands were shaking as I turned the handle and threw the door open, only to be met with the sight of an overgrown courtyard. It was surrounded by high, barbed wire fences, but there was a small gap near the base that I might be able to squeeze through. But as I took a step forward, I felt something, cold fingers, icy and skeletal, clamped down on my shoulder. I screamed and spun around, but the hallway was empty. The thing was gone. I was free. I stumbled into the night, gasping for air, but something lingered with me, a sense of being followed. The feeling of eyes upon me never left. The hospital had let me go, but I knew it wasn't over. The hospital would always have a claim on me, its whispers would always haunt my dreams, and no matter how far I ran, it would never truly release me. I never told anyone the full story. Who would believe me? No one would. But I will never forget that night, that place, the woman in the mirror, the thing that crawled through the darkness. And I will never set foot near that hospital again. Because some places, some things, are better left forgotten.